Imagine a species of creature that sprouts from the earth. Hatched from no egg and born from no mother, these creatures grow on trees or vines. You might initially mistake them for oranges or exotic gourds, but remove the outer shell of one, and there you will find more than pulp, seeds, or pith. Something rustles, white and innocent, as soft as wool. A lamb-like thing winks up at you. This is how the species known variously as the borhamets, baromets, or the vegetable lamb of Tartary was first depicted by European writers in the Middle Ages. But the system of categorization that made such an animal-plant hybrid scientifically feasible is much older. The natural history of the vegetable lamb bears a peculiar kinship to that of corals and anemones. All are zoophytes, a category that emerged in antiquity for organisms displaying both plant and animal qualities. The classification schema known as the Great Chain of Being once divided the world into minerals, plants, animals, and men. Aristotle noted the existence of creatures that complicated such distinctions. Nature passes so gradually from inanimate to animate things that, from their continuity, their boundary and the mean between them is indistinct. But he remained firm on the impossibility of a fixed, terrestrial being. Some creatures are stationary, while others are locomotive. The fixed animals are aquatic, but this is not the case with any of the inhabitants of the land. Other ancient naturalists followed suit. In a treatise on stones, Aristotle's student Theophrastus expressed uncertainty about whether coral should be classified as a mineral or a plant. Pliny the Elder's Natural History, written centuries later, placed corals between plants and animals. During the Roman Empire, the zoophyte was a known quantity, even if its actual reference remained murky. The chimerical category continued to preoccupy naturalists in the Middle Ages. Sessile marine organisms served as its prime example, but others forgot Aristotle's dictum regarding terrestrial fixity and fantasized about a paradigmatic zoophyte that would be at once a lamb and a plant. The Travels of Sir John Mandeville, written between 1357 and 1371, is a fantastical account of an Englishman's encounters in the Near and Far East. It is largely recognized as the first medieval source to visually illustrate the vegetable lamb for a European audience. The floral body differs across manuscripts but often branches symmetrically, with 2 or 4 pods sprouting miniature, happy lambs. The illustrations complement Mandeville's description of the kingdom of Kaldul in India as rich in animal plants that resemble a kind of gourd. And when they be ripe, men cut them in two, and men find within a little beast, in flesh, in bone and blood, as though it were a little lamb without wool. Here, the vegetable lamb is a kind of stone fruit, but in place of a pit, there is a small, bleeding beast, and men eat both the fruit and the beast, and that is a great marvel. Of that fruit I have eaten, although it were wonderful, but that I know well that God is marvelous in his works. Some of Mandeville's account is thought to come from a manuscript credited to the Minorite friar Odoric of Pordenone, who took a journey contemporaneous with the Englishman's supposed travels. Returning to Europe in 1330, Odoric described his visit to a place known as Grand Cannes, where he talked to persons worthy of credit. Near the mountain of Capsius in the Calor province, they recalled seeing gourds that contained a little beast like unto a young lamb. Odoric proceeded to compare the wondrous story to events closer to home, namely the mythic barnacle goose. I myself have heard reported that there stand certain trees upon the shore of the Irish Sea, bearing fruits like unto a gourd, which at a certain time of the year do fall into the water and become birds called barnacles. And this is true. Skepticism emerged quickly. The Italian polymath Girolamo Cardano filed numerous objections in his 1557 work, De Rerum Natura. How could this organism bleed if it did not have a heart? Nevertheless, he remained open to the existence of a terrestrial zoophyte if the climate was right. Where the atmosphere was thick and dense, there might perhaps be a plant having sensation and also imperfect flesh, such as that of mollusks and fishes. This left him receptive to mockery by his colleagues. That same year, the Italian scholar Julius Caesar Scaliger ridiculed the vegetable lamb, even as he contributed to the legend's textual record. He classified it as lusus naturae, a monstrous phenomenon not possible within the order of nature. For Scaliger, the wonderful tartar plant grows 3 feet in height and has the likeness of a real lamb, having feet, hoofs, ears, and a head perfect with the exception of horns. Instead of horns, the plant has hairs in their shape. Its vegetable meat tastes less like fruit than the flesh of a crayfish. It bleeds real blood. Scaliger adds other colorful details, stressing the plant's lamb-like nature. It grazes like a sheep, albeit on a fixed leash. Whilst the plant is surrounded with herbage, it lives as does a lamb, but as soon as it has consumed all within its reach, it withers and dies. Its only natural predator is the wolf. Despite contributing to its ethology, Scaliger ends his description with disbelief. Trained at Cardano, I would like to know from you how 4 distinct legs and their feet can be produced from one stem. Where Manville and Oderick found several fruiting lambs per plant, other early modern naturalists took Cardano and Scaliger's position and recorded only one. In the striking visual tradition that accompanies these accounts, the lambs are larger, 1 per plant, perching improbably on top of a surprisingly durable stalk. The French botanist Claude Duret marveled at such an organism in his 1605 treatise, Histoire admirable des plantes. Inhabiting Scythia or Tartary, a vague region lying somewhere between the Volga and Ural rivers, and near the Caspian Sea, this Agnus Scythicus grew a full-bodied lamb. Its bones supposedly offered powers of divination to those who placed them in their mouths. Duret himself never observed the organism firsthand. Instead, he relied upon a very ancient Hebrew book, entitled in Latin the Talmud Ierusalimitanum, and written by a Jewish rabbi Jechanan, assisted by others, in the year of salvation 436. It was in form like a lamb, and from its navel grew a stem or root by which this zoophyte, or plant animal, was fixed and attached, like a gourd, to the soil below the surface of the ground. According to the length of its stem or root, it devoured all the herbage it was able to reach within the circle of its tether. The hunters who went in search of this creature were unable to capture or remove it until they had succeeded in cutting the stem with well-aimed arrows or darts. The animal then immediately fell prostrate to the earth and died. Its bones, being placed with certain ceremonies and incantations in the mouth of one desiring to foretell the future, caused that person to be seized with a spirit of divination and endowed with the gift of prophecy. Unlike Mandeville's supposed eyewitness account, Duret's description of this singularly admirable and almost incredible creature leans heavily on the authority of historical sources and erudite precursors. These include a Rabbi Simeon, who may have been the 2nd century Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, traditionally credited with compiling the Kabbalistic Zohar. They also include Sigismund von Herberstein, ambassador to the Duke of Muscovy during the first quarter of the 16th century. Von Herberstein, in turn, heard about the vegetable lamb from a man called Demetrius Daniel. This reliance on hearsay is common in medieval and early modern natural histories and bestiaries. Such works often lacked anatomical or even taxonomic classification, but made sure to include stories, fables, and the legendary properties of the entities they described. In Cardano's words, we receive no less benefits from fables than from histories. Other naturalists had other theories. Adjudicating the vegetable lamb's existence became a who's who of early modern science. Fortunio Listi, Francis Bacon, Giambattista della Porta, and Athanasius Kircher all weighed in. For Bacon, The figure makes the fable. The vegetable lamb's qualities were exaggerated aspects of a real plant, but those closer to the supposed source were more skeptical still. Perhaps in some histories of these parts, you may have heard of a vegetative lamb which devours all the grass about it, and then dies, wrote the physician Samuel Collins from Moscow to Robert Boyle, father of modern chemistry and co-founder of the Royal Society. Fables which have not the least shadow of truth. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the vegetable lamb leapt off the pages of natural historical description and into Baroque cabinets of curiosity. Preserved specimens from Tartary began appearing in European collections, alongside geodes, starfish, fossils, animal skulls, amulets, shrunken heads, and any other imponderabilia that caught a collector's eye. In 1698, the Irish naturalist Sir Hans Sloane saw one of these specimens up close and looked at it awry. He had obtained the alleged corpse, preserved through desiccation, from one Mr. Buckley, chief surgeon at Fort St. George in the East Indies. Buckley had shipped it in a cabinet of Chinese medical instruments and curios from the city known today as Chennai, India. Sloane noted that the specimen's supposed feet looked exactly like the footstalks of ferns, both without and within. Its supposed wool was nothing more than the fine rhizomes of the fern. He observed that such vegetable tufts, which served as natural anticoagulants, were used in places like Jamaica to stop bleeding. Sloane was the first to suggest that vegetable lambs may have merely been fern-root clusters, dried and crafted into lamb-like shapes to satisfy the curiosity of gullible Europeans. It seemed to be shaped by art to imitate a lamb. The roots or climbing part were made to resemble the body, and the extended footstalks the legs. Where Sloane found a hoax, his contemporary Engelbert Kempfer saw a euphemism. The German naturalist and physician had traveled with a diplomatic entourage to Persia in 1683 and worked as a surgeon for the Dutch East India Company thereafter. During this time, he searched for the vegetable lamb, ad risum et nauseam, but never encountered a zoophyte feeding on grass. Instead, he returned with a theory regarding astrakhan, the tightly curled fleece of newborn or fetal caracal lambs. This fleece was treasured by those wealthy and powerful enough to acquire superior textiles for their clothes. What if such a material was different enough in quality to be imagined as differing in origin, shorn not from a baby sheep but from a vegetable lamb? The pelts of these slaughtered, unborn caracal lambs were uncommonly soft. The tan hide was so thin as to scarcely resemble leather at all. For Kempfer, the vegetable lamb became a kind of fig leaf, making more palatable the disturbing way this luxurious wool was sourced. The Vegetable Lamb of Tartary, a curious fable of the cotton plant, was published in 1887 by the English naturalist Henry Lee. Lee was the director of the Bristol Aquarium and an outspoken skeptic of krakens, sea serpents, and other marine cryptids. His book offers the most thorough debunking of the ovine zoophyte. An elegant popular scientific thinker in his own right, Lee builds upon Sloane and Kempfer's theories to offer his own interpretation of the creature's true origin. Returning to John Mandeville's late medieval visual imagination, Lee argues that it was all a misunderstanding of the simple cotton shrub. Lee finds the trope as far back as Herodotus' Histories. Certain trees bear for their fruit fleeces surpassing those of sheep in beauty and excellence, and the natives clothe themselves in cloths made therefrom. The vegetable lamb was birthed by the novelty of cotton in the European imagination. Lee continues. Cotton had been cultivated for its fibers in Egypt until the 7th century, but its range later receded to Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent. The first rumor concerning cotton, that wool as white and soft as that of a lamb grew on trees, was exaggerated into the statement that lambs grew upon certain trees and were therefore partly animal and partly vegetable. Even as it was being debunked all around, the vegetable lamb showed an uncanny tenacity for survival. When Carl Linnaeus introduced his system of binomial nomenclature for the classification of plants in his 1753 species Plantarum, he used the mythical organism's name for the Chinese woolly fern from which phony zoophytes had been crafted. The fern species responsible is known as Cibodium barometes to this day. An entry about the Agnus Scythicus even appears in Diderot's Encyclopedia, mostly as an example of superstitious hoaxes to be discarded. The author of the lengthy entry demurs on the question of the creature's existence by distinguishing between ordinary beings and miraculous ones, offering a primer in the virtues of empirical observation. Here, the Boromets occasions a rather involved articulation of the encyclopedist's method. If we want to dwell in reality and not give ourselves up to dreams, we must finally lay the lamb to rest. Here, then, is all the wonder of the Scythian lamb reduced to nothing, or at least to very little. It is a hairy root which people twist and turn to make it look a little like a lamb. We must consider whether the evidence comes from people who were actually present at the scene they are describing. We must ask what risks they took in telling others about events they claim to have witnessed firsthand. It must be admitted that, if individuals have put their lives at risk by affirming the truth of their testimony, then it will acquire a great force. It will acquire even more force when they have actually sacrificed and lost their lives. We must not confuse an event which occurred before the eyes of an entire people with one which was witnessed by only a small number of individuals. If we do not want to give ourselves up to dreams, and if we are sincere in our love of truth, then these are some of the principles we must apply when deciding whether to believe or disbelieve.